about climate justice, and I hope that everyone is ready and well today and excited about today's event. And I'll start off the event with uh, a small, perhaps a quote, and then how I think about my work as well as our um, society as a whole in terms of what we are to do in terms of climate justice. Okay, and so there's a quote saying, and I'm not going to attribute it to whom because it's always debatable. Who said this quote? The measure of a civilization is how it treats its weakest members. And when we think about its weakest members, we tend to think of elderly, right, animals, young children, and people with disabilities whose voice is not well heard or well stood for. Now, think about future generations of billions and billions of unborn babies and children, as well as trillions and trillions of organisms and animals and plants that have yet to have any voice whatsoever. Doing right by them is climate justice. Leaving a planet that is habitable and thrivable will be the true measure of a global society. And I hope that the students, attendees, participants, everyone in here, by being part of this event, as well as being part of whatever educational opportunities, programs that you are in, contribute to that climate justice by leaving a planet that is livable, habitable, and thrivable for those unborn babies and young children. All right, so with that, I'd like to share the purpose of this teaching session. It's to introduce controversies and issues around climate change and sustainable development. At the end of the session, I hope that you will have learned about controversies surrounding fairness and justice through some incentive some incentive-based compensation schemes of climate change, and the role gender plays in the fight against climate change, and but not last but not least, estimating carbon emissions from certain activities and ways to actively reduce carbon footprint. Now, with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker and presenter today. Our first speaker for today is Xiomara Acevedo from Colombia. Xiomara is a climate activist, founder, and director of Barranquilla +20. Barranquilla is 20+20 is women-led NGO whose mission is to educate and empower children, youth, and women to drive climate and biodiversity action in Colombia and South America. She also coordinates the Global Youth Biodiversity Network in Colombia and the Women for Climate Justice National Network. Most recently, Xiomara and Barranquilla +20 acquired a grant of $50,000 from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to support her work in Colombia. She has spoken in several international UN environmental conferences, such as the Conference of Parties of the Convention of Biological Diversity, as well as the most recent COP27 in Egypt. She has won many distinguished awards in her career too. She's a National Youth Volunteer Award winner and also recognized as one of 10 outstanding young people of Atlántico, Colombia, by the Junior Chamber International. She's currently studying a master's in conservation leadership at Cambridge University, supported by a scholarship from Robert Sampson Foundation. Today, she's going to talk about why gender equality is crucial in the fight against climate change. Now, welcome, Xiomara.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, I'm super excited, honestly, to be here. I think you provided indeed the perfect intro for what I'm going to talk, because definitely climate justice is involving the social aspects. Without this, we will never achieve any justice, no nature justice, no climate justice, no gender justice, if we don't put people at the center. So I think this is very critical, and I'm very excited to share this time with you within this global movement of solve climate by 2030. Every action counts. I think that's why drive us to be here. I know it's quite late in I mean in back in Burma, but it's amazing to see more than 50 people willing to share the word, share our knowledge, share our experiences. So thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm going to, yeah, as it has been mentioned, I'm going to speak about this connection between gender and climate. So I think you all can see my presentation, right? Okay, perfect. So first of all, I would like also for all of you to get to know a little bit of the organization that I created. I found this organization that is called Barranquilla Plus 20. Maybe if we have some lawyers here, the Plus 20 is because of the Rio Plus 20 convention of people that like international law, international environmental policies. They may recognize this Plus 20. This is, as I said, for the Rio Plus 20 convention, which was 20 years after the Rio Convention in 1982, which put environmental issues at the global level because of this Rio Convention. The Convention on Biological Diversity was born, also the UNFCCC, the Convention on Climate Change, the Convention against the desertification of soils, among others. So it was really a pivotal moment for environmental issues. And 20 years after, I was in the university, like now you are. And well, I was, looking for a space where we can talk about these issues, about environmental issues, about the involvement of young, of children, of women, of citizens in general in these topics, but I couldn't find, like more of sort of these spaces. So, well, we said, okay, let's create it. Let's do something like, like the thing that we have in our minds, and a space where people can convene, can participate, can learn from each other, and also can raise the importance of having a voice in environmental issues. And then, well, I didn't have like the expectation to, that this will be an organization. At first thought, okay, this will be like some event, but then the reaction was so good, the impact was so good that we decided to do another event, and then another event, and then a campaign, and then a project. So imagine this is, I'm talking that our first activity was 2012, which is almost like 11 years. Yes. Well, now it's an organization, a youth-led and a woman-led organization that is now not only working in Barranquilla, which is a city in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, but also we are now working in different regions of the country. So yeah, just maybe because maybe for some of our participants, this can be the start of any venture or any organization or any campaign. Just, start thinking these ideas. The good thing in our countries, I think, is that we have a lot of possibilities to do something to impact. It's not like everything is done, everything is perfect. There's always things that we can contribute to make the difference, to make the change. And this is also, a message that I wanted to raise, because as I said, as a student, I have this idea of, mobilizing more people for these issues. Now you're here. So this states a motivation. And I think that definitely maybe as a consequence of these talks, we can have more initiatives to to impact our countries, being digital or non-digital, everything counts. So yes, if you have a chance later after the event, you can follow Barranquilla Plus 20. And particularly, I wanted to talk about Women for Climate Justice. We developed 2 years ago an initiative that is at national level that is engaging women from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. Even we are in Colombia, we of course have a big diversity of cultures, of knowledge, of people, of territories, ecosystems. So we came together to position the importance of having a voice, but also influencing the decision-making processes and the policy-making processes that are tackling climate change. Because societies, and this is also a global issue because we don't have any country that is perfect in terms of gender equality. Every country has still challenges in this regard. And it's really necessary, since also the climate crisis is a global problem, that we don't see these issues like disconnected, because otherwise we can be doing harm, and just we can be like increasing the gap and not diminishing the gap, which is what we need in order to not leave anyone behind, as the SDGs states. So we wanted to do this to reinforce the leadership of women, because women have different barriers to make their voices heard, to have their initiatives funded, to have their priorities in policies, etc. So it's quite critical, as I say, that we start diminishing those gaps in order to have the justice that we all want to see, that we all believe, or the majority of people believe in. So this is a diverse network. As you can see, mostly young women from indigenous, Afro-descendants, from cities, from towns, doing different stuff, mobilizing the seeds protection, mobilizing ecosystem restoration, using art to educate people, using law policy to influence. So it's a diverse group of women. And this is also another message that I would like to bring here, and is that you don't have to be a scientist to contribute to climate justice, or you don't have to be a lawyer, or no. Every role and every academic background and every people can do something for the climate crisis, because we don't only need technical solutions or technological or policy solutions or educational solutions. We need everything, like all of this, and also communications, artistic solutions, from every field. People need to be addressing climate change. So we don't have excuses, this is the good thing about climate change, that people don't have excuses to not do something because everyone can do something, because since it's a humankind transformation, it requires a big transformation, a cultural transformation that has to be in our knowledge, in our behaviors, in our attitudes, everything that mobilize the passion, that mobilize a low carbon life is needed. So basically, that's why we also need this convenience of people with different backgrounds, from different knowledges, because we all have to do something against this climate and nature crisis. So women are particularly affected. I want to put the spotlight in women in this conversation, because many of the traditional economical models, policy models are exposing women to gender discrimination in different ways. So this is influencing that we got an exposure that is diminishing our capacities to act against climate change. So as I said, no country in the world has already achieved gender equality. And even developed countries, they also have challenges in this matter. So imagine our countries that are also developing countries that have a lot of issues too in regards of participation, access to education, access to natural resources, among others. This also puts a discrimination for women, because for women it's more difficult to, access to this stuff. For women, sometimes it's more difficult to have a healthy life because water scarcity. For women, it's more difficult to have sexual and reproductive rights because some societies impose their values for women without taking into account what are the needs and the knowledge of women. So there are many of these traditional models that most countries in the world has that are leaving the women's priorities behind and are prioritizing all the priorities without, as I say, taking into account what are the priorities that are needed by women. And for this, we need to bring women to the table, not only like to suppose. So among this climate crisis context, what is a reality too, besides the climate crisis, is that we have a gender unequal world that, as I said, this climate crisis is not gender neutral. And we already have some indicators that are showing this climate crisis needs to tackle the gender crisis in order to bring transformational change. Otherwise, we will be having two crises, increasing their impact, and the situation will be worse for future generations. So some of these indicators that are showing us that is needed to bridge the gender and the climate crisis together is, for example, mortality due to disasters. We know that in some events and hazards, women are particularly impacted more than men. UN Women also say that the women and girls are the majorities of the people that are migrating because of climate-induced migration. We have another indicator that says that women are almost 70% of the poor people in the world. So there is a feminization of poverty. We also have some societies in which there is not equal participation, no equal access to rights. So this also diminishes the capacities of women to be resilient against climate change. So some of these indicators, as I said, show us that the gender crisis is not neutral, and if it's not tackling correctly these gender barriers, the situation will be worse for women and girls. So all of us as people that are demanding climate justice, that believe that is necessary for developing countries to not cope with the disproportionate impacts of climate change, we also have to include women and girls there. Climate justice needs to recognize these impacts that are influencing social, economy, public health, that are having other effects. Inequalities and the existing inequalities in our countries will be deeper if we don't tackle these issues. So if it's quite important when we are coming from these developing countries, we know that we are not the responsibles of the climate crisis. We know our countries didn't emit, the same level of emissions that developed countries. But we know that the impacts of climate change are felt the most in our countries, right? Because I'm pretty sure many of you indeed could have some experiences in the territories, in their communities. Maybe, we are already victims of the losses and damages caused by climate change. So we demand from developed countries to assume the most of the responsibility because of the historical emissions. And at the same time, this requires finance, this requires technological support, among other stuff. So we have this very clear. We have seen most of the climate movements in the Global South demanding this, but it's like being for another side, women movements have been also working and striving for equality, for rights, for access, for justice. So I think that it's quite important to just bring them together, because we are not asking for different stuff. Indeed, we are asking for justice. We are asking for equality. We are demanding that historical responsibilities need to be addressed by developed countries. And this is also the case, as I've been saying, for women movements. So why, instead of having like two different fights, most of us need to include gender issues in our demands and in our priorities. And the men that are here might be thinking, okay, but what is the role of men? So men also have a role here, and is engaging other men. This is critical. I don't know if this happens to you in your country, for example, but in my country, I have seen that if some women are talking to men about gender, some of them are paying attention, or some of them are like, I don't know, it's not easy like to question these topics. But when a man is talking to these men about the climate justice, about gender, they pay more attention. They are seeing, okay, they are hearing, they are thinking, they have a different reaction. And this, for me, as a mobilizer, as an activist, provides the opportunity to bring more men, to engage more men, because gender equality won't be achieved without men. This is not about dividing. No, this is about convening together. This is about being allies of equality. When I say support women leadership, support girl leadership, it's because most of the women, they are leaders in their communities. So this, of course, affects positively men, boys in their communities. But also men has a role here, and is to engage more men so we can have, a long-term change. So yes, this is also an invitation and a provocation for the men that are here to, bring these topics in their communities, in their WhatsApp chats, in their with their friends, because it's quite important that we have more men. As I said, we want to achieve gender equality without men. So you are also very, very much needed. And facing climate change requires that political actions that contemplate equality, human rights, collective rights. We have many local communities, so it's quite important that these communities also have ensured their rights, because they've been protecting our forests for many centuries. They have the knowledge of the forest, they have of the rivers, of the wetlands. It's quite critical, the importance of local communities in nature and climate issues, because we have the world that we have basically because of their conservation models. And of course, the educational, the academy, the scientific community is very important. But I don't want to send the message that some community is more important. No, all communities, being scientific, from the academy, from local communities, from women, from young people, all of these have the same power to affect change. I want to see what are the reactions. I just cannot, I don't see something like, guys, let me know how this is, maybe sounding to you. I want to see like in the chat, or if you react or something, what do you think about these topics? Have you heard about this maybe in the past, or let me know how this is resonating for the people that are in this event. I think, yes, that would be really great. Send me a reaction or something if you agree with gender justice as climate justice, or if you don't. Let me know. Okay, great. I'm seeing now. Thank you. Great. And also you can do any comment in the chat if you are needing, or if you want to talk, just have a conversation with me. and yeah, like with all of us, it's quite like important, yeah, like to see what you think of this. So the intersectionality environmental approach is one of these approaches that is definitely saying what is important of recognizing those existing inequalities in society, and at the same time, their importance to be addressed correctly in order to have better policies to impact climate change. So this intersectionality approach is very important because this is, for example, taking into account race, the economic background, the access to education, etc. We know that this is important in order to address the climate change impacts. If we are not having the correct information about the people that we want to impact, well, we will be, just doing probably or doing hard, because even we have a good intention, we are not, contributing to diminish the barriers, or we will be just, not having the desired impact that we want to achieve. So in every campaign, it's quite important. And if you want to develop a campaign on climate justice, nature justice, gender justice, that you also know who are the people that are willing to engage, what are the knowledge, what are their access to rights, what are, the barriers, what are the contributions, etc. So you are talking to people because we want more people to use their power to drive climate action. Okay, so it's very important that you think of the intersectionality approach in order to have better campaigns, better policies, because I know that you are going to do some activities after this event. So in the world, most of the topics of environmental issues that indeed they, as I say, they have been gaining more importance from the 90s. Usually they were seen as different topics. So from one side, the environmental, from other side, the gender, from other side, biodiversity, from other side, soil. They've been like traditionally isolated, but now we have more scientific evidence that indeed all the problems are interconnected. And in order to affect and have a positive change, we need to have solutions that have multiple benefits and co-benefits in different sectors. And this was also the case of gender and climate. Many of these advancements has been gaining relevance because of some international and multilateral spaces in which many organizations, many movements, pushed a lot of countries, non-state actors, in order to include climate change and also to include gender as an interconnected issue. In the past, for example, the United Nations of Climate Change, which is the most important state body, that is the one that indeed is the supreme body for climate change around the world, with the representation of all countries of the world, but at the same time, non-state participation of the private, of academy, of women groups, youth groups, indigenous peoples, etc. In this space where the Paris Agreement, of course, was decided, in this space, the gender considerations were not included years ago. However, with the Paris Agreement, indeed, gender was also recognized as a principle that is necessary to include when driving climate action. So because of this, we have now an explicit mention of gender justice. And at the same time, we, of course, have a call to include more the representation of women or girls in these processes. I want to mention a few of them. As I said, the UNFCCC, so now has explicit recommendations and explicit mentions of the necessity to drive gender justice. Also, we have in the climate finance mechanisms, such as the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, which are the main finance bodies that are mobilizing the resources to tackle and to achieve the climate goals around the world. They also are obligated to include gender, but also include how they are going to monitor the achievement of gender equality through the projects that are being financed with their resources. So this is also quite important. If you have a project, or in your country, in your region, you have projects that are being supported by these finance mechanisms of the convention, you also have to know that they have to achieve human rights, that they have to ensure gender equality through their projects. We also have another convention that is quite important too, and indeed is quite old, that is the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This convention also, now, since this convention is more about women, now is including climate consideration too, because as I say, traditional model is also increasing the barriers of women. And, this is feedback. One crisis fits the other. So it's really necessary to bring these two issues together. The Sustainable Development Goals, we have a gender goal, we have a climate goal, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, among others. So I want to also provide like some recommendations to start, great. Do we have this? Yes, someone said, are we also allowed to talk? Of course. How do you prefer to do it, right now, or you want me to finish?
Tamara, please finish it, and then perhaps I'll leave 10 minutes at the end of your session, and then participants can raise their hands and ask questions, and I'll kind of like moderate so that we are on time. Okay.
Super. Okay, thanks. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we're indeed achieving that part of the end of the presentation, and this is about some recommendations that I would like to provide besides all that I've been saying, in order for you to, for those that wants to get deeper understanding, or want to do more research, or want to do their campaigns, the projects, or are inspired to do something. First, understand the scope of the international legal frameworks on gender and climate change, and how this is implemented at the local level. For example, Colombia, because of the mention that gender has in the Paris Agreement, Colombia now has to create a gender and climate change action plan, for example. And some of countries in the Latin American region has already formulated this, and some of them are in the process. And I know in Asia too, they also have to do these strategies to address climate and gender. So it's quite important that, if the ones that are into policy, this also needs to be developed at the national level. This is not only, like at global level, and that's it. Of course, global decisions are very relevant, but they have to have an implementation on the ground if they want to achieve those goals at global level. So, as I said, all countries have to develop this gender and climate change action plan. For those of you that want to participate, will be amazing. Promote knowledge, promote more data, promote more statistics. For example, in Colombia, we have some barriers regarding this. When a disaster happens, they are not having some of the events. I don't want to make general assumption, but in some disaster, for example, we have been missing some data about men, women, and diversities. So it's like, how you're gonna know, the importance of addressing gender if you don't have data, for example. It's like quite critical that we take into account that we need more statistics, that we need more data to support the mobilization of gender strategies, and also to better respond to the necessities and priorities of women. This is also quite important at regional level too. I would like to see, for example, for Latin America, how is the context of the region regarding women and girls and men and their impacts to climate change. And also initiatives are, developing this, but I know more work needs to be done in this regard. Also, the strengthening and development of capacities. Never underestimate the power of a talk that you can provide, or a book that you can recommend or an initiative you can have, because we need more of this in order to bring more people to the table, in order to bring more people to the action, and also to have a voice in the policy making, in the strategy making, in the follow-up of the projects, in the monitoring, in the evaluation. So I'm not even talking about like local communities or the student community. Even our policy makers, they also need to have more capacities on these issues, because it's quite critical around the world. We have like a lot of challenges regarding climate literacy. So we need more capacity building at all levels, being this at the international level or the national or the local, the community, for all decision makers, corporations, industry, etc. All actors in society need to strengthen more their capacities, not only in climate, but also in gender issues, because these are topics that are evolving fast. And therefore, you need to be updated to identify the challenges, but also the solutions. Equal representation and participation is quite important. As I say, for example, in Latin America, we have some barriers in data and statistics. And one of these is, for example, regarding the participation of women in national and subnational decision-making spaces in relation to climate change, for example. We don't have like that kind of information. Maybe in your region also is the same or is different. So start identifying what are those gaps in information and in representation and in participation, because it's important that we reverse the curve on the lack of information too. And also in the policy, we need more policies, deepening this nexus, being implemented, being monitored, and at different levels. We already started at the global level, as I said, with the Paris Agreement, but this is just the start. This is a new conversation. Guys, this is not like everything has been said or everything is done. Indeed, this is just very recent, and we need more people to understand this, and at the same time, as I said, identify the barriers, identify the opportunities to develop more research in this sense, because the Paris Agreement was in 2015, so it's been like 8 years, something like that we are just talking about this. So it's a quite recent conversation against all the conversations that have been, longer in the international space. So I think we all need all of you, as I said, and I will leave it here. Just motivating you and encouraging you to, continue this conversation at all levels. Thank you so much.
All right. Hey, so we will go forward with the next speaker. Welcome, everyone, and I hope that you're back and ready for the next presentation and discussion. The second speaker for today is Patita Nkamunu. Patita is a Maasai indigenous woman activist and conservation practitioner from Kenya. She has a long career spanning nearly 40 years in conservation policies, lobbying, and advocacy in Kenya. She is a member of Kenya's Indigenous Women Council and the National Conservancy Council, Kenya. Her story was featured in the Wildlife Warrior documentary series, which is broadcasted in 42 countries. Last year, she won 2 scholarships, one from the MasterCard Foundation, and another one from the Wildlife Conservation Network, which allows her to study for a master's degree in conservation leadership at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. With that, I would like to welcome Patita Nkamunu for the presentation. I hope that I pronounce your name correctly.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Thank you very much. It's understood. These names are from different continents, so we don't expect people to pronounce our name clearly or our name clearly. But the Patita is fine. Most of my classmates call me Patita. Everybody knows me Patita, so I understand. As you have all heard, my name is Ngamunu Patita. I am an Indigenous woman from Kenya. I was given quite big accolades by Joe. I'm 42 years. I have lived with wildlife for 2 years, but I have not worked for 42 years. But that means I have been around wildlife since I was born. So I'll just proceed to share some of the work that I do in Kenya and in East Africa, but mostly in Kenya. But just to give you a background, just as I begin to share screen, is that most of the biodiversity that we have in the world is found among the indigenous lands. And my community is among those that have kept our ecosystems and our biodiversity close to almost 70% within what we found previously. So our way of life, our culture has been very critical in terms of biodiversity protection. To share what we have been struggling with for some time is the loss of biodiversity. And this comes from the lack of space. Not that the space is shrinking, but what has happened over time is that we gave up our land to allow creation of national parks. But then we continue to live in a manner that is conservation friendly. And so we find ourselves with 75% of the wildlife in Kenya is found outside of parks. But what happens is that as much as you see Kenya as a tourist destination, the communities do not benefit from conservation. And as a result, the land is converting to other uses. So that has caused the loss of habitat. So I'll just want to share some of the work that I do back here in Kenya so that you can understand what is it that we are doing to try and ensure that communities benefit from conservation. I'll talk about payment of ecosystem services. My colleague Leo shared with me that I'm talking to people who may not be conversant with what ecosystem services are. So I'll just try to define that a little bit. But the photo you see there is our partners from Sri Lanka who are working with our indigenous communities to pay out some amount of money to the landowners so that they keep the land open for both wildlife and livestock. So just to introduce, an ecosystem basically is just like what you would call a city, but in terms of biodiversity means that it is a complete circuit that has got, it's like a human body, which has got everything connected to it. So in this case, ecosystem services then refer to the natural environment which we all exist in. And ecosystem services are the many and varied benefits to human provided by natural environment and healthy ecosystems. And some of these ecosystems include agro ecosystems, forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystems, and aquatic ecosystems. So this generally covers the fauna and flora found on terrestrial, on water masses that provide the services that human beings cannot produce but are benefiting from. Let me close this door. Somebody needs to close this door. There's a noise coming. Just 1 minute. Sorry, we are doing a national stakeholder analysis for carbon trading. So you are trying to get communities to give us approvals. So sorry. So there are several types of payment of ecosystem services. The types of them are market-based instruments that increasingly are used to finance nature conservation. And some of them include incentives offered to landowners in exchange for managing their land to provide some ecological services. Just to go on to my next slide, the category 1 refers to approaches that directly incentivize conservation. Category 2, approaches that involve sustainable use of key species of conservation concern. The third one is payment of ecosystem incentivizing species-based conservation. And the fourth one is payment of ecosystem services incentivizing area-based conservation. The first one is generally speaking to how partners then work to identify a conservation area of interest and recognize that unless an effort is made to ensure that wherever that space exists, if there will be no co-management of both communities, government, and any other stakeholders around to ensure that that space is protected, then they provide incentives to ensure that the holders of that particular space continue to keep it that way. So they directly incentivize conservation efforts. For example, in my area, if, for example, you find a space where wildlife are moving on, but somebody, for example, a company that wants to produce cement, and you can mine stones that come from it, then the NGOs decide to work with those communities directly to ensure that the land does not change its use. The second category is where, for example, you identify a key species, a breeding areas, for example, for the black rhino or for the white rhino, and realizing that the rhino will not have a place to breed, you then decide to specifically identify that area as a rhino protection zone and ensure that if it is purchasing the land, then you purchase. If not purchasing, how do you ensure that the person who owns that land does not interfere with that breeding habitat for that particular rhino? The third one is pointing out, analyzing what is the plus or minus of that particular area. Does the government have access to that area minus the landowners? Does any stakeholder have access to that land minus the landowner? Then look at the pros and cons of each of them, then provide an amount of money that may not necessarily be market value, but counters any other use for that land. The other one is basically almost like category 2, where you have specifically identified the conservation use for that area and pay out value for what might be lost. Now, the map I have down here generally is a map of Kenya. And I don't know if I'm able to zoom this. I don't think I'm able to zoom it. But just to explain with the colors that are seen there, it shows regions that have been created by communities. What communities went ahead to do is that after realizing that we've given up so much land to government to be protected area, which means it belongs to the government, then we continue to have wildlife on our land. But the government continued to get revenue from tourism, and communities were not benefiting from tourism. So we created what we call conservancies. Conservancies is a form of land that is recognized as holding both uses, where wildlife is using the land and livestock is using the land. So then you register your land as a conservancy, which means it hosts both livestock and wildlife. So this map that you're seeing is showing dotted areas of the regions where we found different conservancies. There are those that have in forested areas, some on savanna grassland, like where I come from. So this is a movement where communities are now beginning to also get revenues from, for example, carbon, getting money from donors who are willing to pay for the protection of certain species. And the third one, for example, if you have a tourist investor who wants to put up a lodge, wants to put up a holiday destination or a place for visitors to come and view wildlife, then you have an agreement with the community landowners who you pay money to for using their land for your investment. Now, as I had previously said, that what has created or what has led to this kind of payment of ecosystem services thriving in my country is that we have experienced what we call the fortress kind of conservation, where after parks were created, the communities were alienated. This is their land, but then the government just, as a result of colonization, of course, after the colonialists left, they had created these parks. So what they did is that they just demarcated the land that belonged to the communities, pushed communities out, and created this, what they would then call parks, where they protect the animals. You cannot go in, you have to pay to go in, but the communities did not receive any compensation for it. So that lack of benefit sharing created a gap where communities felt that they were being pushed away. But of course, being that these are open ecosystem means the park is not fenced, so the wildlife go in and out. So it means the lions come to our land and they go to the park. The lions don't know the difference between my land and government land. They move in and out, but the benefit is only going to the government. So after the conservancies came together and research was done, it was discovered that 75% of our fauna and flora is outside of the parks. So then communities began to increasingly push the government to say, we have to share these benefits. So what I would say, the payment of ecosystem services started to fix a system failure, which is the lack of benefit sharing. Because then the communities were able to negotiate that when the wildlife is in our land, we are co-managing the wildlife with the government. If a tourist comes into our conservancy, they will pay us the fees that they're paying to go to the park. If they come and sleep in lodges and come and sleep in camps that have been developed by partners, then the money goes to the community. So, and the payment of ecosystem services is introduced to curb loss of habitat fragmentation, fencing of land sale, to cater for our own needs. Because what would happen is, of course, we know there's no more creation of land. They no longer manufacture land where they manufactured it from. In my country, we believe it is God. So the fact that there is no more land, this has allowed communities to actually not convert their land to agriculture because they are not agriculturalists, and has allowed communities to not, the fact that you are receiving money after a quarter, of every quarter, it means that you have accepted to leave your land open. So meaning, if you visit where I live, you were likely going to walk into elephants. You will not tell the difference of being in a park and where we live. And because it's our way of life, we really don't struggle to help communities to live with wildlife. They know how to do it. And the government for a long time has been putting a policy together to compensate communities that are living with wildlife for loss of their wildlife and for loss of life. And since independence, which has been over 56 years, the first ever compensation came 2 years ago, and it only came to those who lost their lives. So if you've lost your cows, if you've lost your sheep and goats to lions, to cheetahs, there is still no compensation for it. Why do we support or promote payment of ecosystem services? Because it becomes an opportunity to recognize and develop a framework for incentive and develop incentives for benefit sharing. So until NGOs, mostly the Nature Conservancy, the World Bank, USAID, I4, all these who work with communities began to consistently support payment of ecosystem services, the benefit sharing model wasn't there. The other thing is that it supports the recognition of indigenous people's values, which has always been that communities, without the community's way of life, the government of Kenya and in East Africa would probably not have wildlife. Reason being, if you look at the map of Kenya that I just showed you, where you find farmers who grow food, you don't find any wildlife because there's no space. But the indigenous communities who have kept their land open and not converted to agriculture, but keeping it for their livestock, because where a zebra would go is where a cow will go. Where an elephant is going to go, it is where bulls will go. So it's pretty much the same ecosystem. They need the same pastures. So then the government has been pushed to recognize that minus the indigenous people knowledge and their way of life, there would be no conservation. I would go on to add that when designing payment of ecosystem services, we frame and design them to protect the rights of indigenous people and the relationship they have with their territories, understanding the principle, the beneficiary to pay the provider. All of us are enjoying clean, fresh air. We are enjoying beautiful nature, but we do not want to invest back to those people who are ensuring that that is happening. The other thing is to identify and test potential opportunities and suitable partners. We have now moved from this form of, if I was to show you another layer, which I don't know if I can get it right now. Let me just try and pull it up. But it's like having this investment where you're only getting one thing out of it. But in actual sense, if you are to maximize on it, you would get much more. Is for example, just selling spare parts, is selling, what do you call it? You sell the car, but you're not selling the spare parts. If you can sell the spare parts, it means you're making more money from it. So I'm trying to see if I can get it. And if I don't, I'll just continue to present from where I am. Just give me a minute. Oops. Okay, let me not stop sharing. Video has been paused. Okay, I've stopped sharing. Let me just continue to do without sharing because I can't seem to get my other presentation. Here it is. Now, if I may rush quickly to go to the let me go there. Now, if you look at this particular screen, what is happening is that communities don't really, they only get money from one form of land production, which is livestock, but they don't get money from carbon. They don't get money from, some parts of tourism get tourism, and what we are now calling biodiversity credits, meaning if we maximize the opportunities for communities, they are able to actually get money from payment of ecosystem services that confirms tourism, livestock markets, carbon, and biodiversity credits. So far, they're only getting from 2 of them. So if we maximize on these opportunities, then we get 4 of them. And with time, we never know what happens. Things might grow, things might turn out positive for communities. So let me stop screen sharing and see whether I can go back to the original presentation. Okay, here we are. Now, that's what I was saying, then finding solutions that then suit what communities need, which means the communities themselves know the service they are providing, but they're not aware that you can get payments from it. So what is our work? Our work is to actually do what we call the free, prior, and informed consent, where you educate communities about the service they are providing. You're telling them, your government is earning this and that from the resources that you're managing, while you as communities are only getting from one source of revenue. So once the communities begin to realize the service they are providing, that is a way of advocating for them to push to get more benefits from their land. Like I had just said before, Wildlife and Biodiversity Conservation List Program, which is done by NGOs, income from tourism. I don't know why I'm unable to minimize this thing. The rest you've seen there is revenue from removal. I don't know, let me try and minimize this. I can't seem to be able to minimize this particular tab. But as you can see from that is that some parts of, like if you go to northern part of Kenya where we neighbor a country called Somalia that is at war. It's a large ecosystem covering huge tracts of land. But because of a neighboring country that is at war, tourism does not thrive. But there's one like there. So they should be able to get money from biodiversity and carbon credits. So each region has its own unique challenges, but then how do communities begin to benefit minus the challenges that they are facing? What opportunities do they have, whether or not there is a war? Because it's not their fault, it's the fault of the government that they are not providing peace in that particular place, or they're not ensuring that there is peace in that region for the communities to maximize or live in peace for them to reap from their natural resources. The mode of payments that we currently do in Kenya, we have 2 of them, which is a group benefit and direct cash transfers, which is an individual benefit. What happens is that to ensure transparency and building trust, we normally pay the money to the landowner so that the community member actually does receive their payment and know that it is they're being paid for a service they're providing. It is not money that is supposed to go to the government or to any community leader, but the money that goes to them. But during free, prior, and informed consent sessions where we want them to give us consent, we normally ask, might you have community projects of interest that you think you want to invest in? If they say they want a health center or a hospital, then we allow the community to agree on whether that is a need they want to be met. If they want, for example, like now, there's been a long drought. We've been buying pastures for the pastoralist. Then we'll take some of that money and buy for each family hay or some grass to ensure that they give it to their livestock. So some of the things we do is we have to ensure that most of the money goes to an individual, while some of it goes to what we call a group benefit or benefit that belongs to the community at large. I said earlier, types of the payment of ecosystem depends on the region. Areas with high tourism, like the Masai Mara, they do tourism benefits and what NGOs are supplementing. In regions where we have instability, like the northern part of Kenya, we are really zeroing in on carbon and biodiversity credits. Okay. I think I've talked about biodiversity credits, photography and ecotourism, which are upcoming or areas of interest that people are continuously thinking about. Which way do we ensure that we capture the opportunities for communities. The impact of some of these programs have been really amazing. The community I come from don't usually use banks. So they have started banking their money, opening up bank accounts as a result of getting their payments, because you can't pay somebody money directly, has to go through the bank for auditing purposes. It has increased their livelihoods because they're able to now diversify. Apart from keeping livestock, now they're getting into other forms of trade because they have extra income or extra cash. It's also allowed them to have security for borrowing money, because so long as the bank realizes that you have an agreement with, for example, an agency like USAID, that every 3 months you get, for example, 40,000 US dollars, that which goes to your household, then you're able to borrow against that lease payment or lease agreement. So communities have been able to diversify their livelihoods, take their children to school, and even get into other businesses that are more resilient. Like now during the dry season, they didn't have to move because then they have investments that they have within their house. I think I want to summarize so that I allow people to probably ask your questions, but some of the challenges are that they're pegged on international processes, so we have to localize them. And tell someone about carbon credits. It's a really technical term. So for them to understand how they're benefiting from carbon means you localize what is carbon, right? How are they benefiting from the carbon? Who is the carbon trader? How is the government regulating the carbon? So it's a really high-tech kind of discussion that has to be localized. So that challenge is that communities always think, are we being paid to sell air? Where is this money for? Where is the money coming from? Is it sustainable? Some of the challenges we face are those. Also, for example, like the government of Kenya wants to start charging, having a tax charge for getting money for carbon. Communities are wondering, why is the government charging us for doing a good service? Why is the government charging us for helping it achieve its SDG and it's increasing its forest cover? So challenges are that once the governments are involved, the discussion changes, because then it's no longer communities and NGOs or communities and stakeholders, but governments are going to be involved, making the discussions more bureaucratic. Linking investors to the market, the carbon market is a highly top-notch market where it's only developed countries that have the infrastructure to develop companies, established companies. So you find ourselves in a position where we feel the power balance is really far and wide. The local communities don't have companies that they can form to trade in carbon. They always have to rely on companies registered outside of Kenya to then come to our country and tell us about how we can work together, the benefit sharing ratio, what percentage goes to who. So there's a power imbalance in this market. The methodologies of verification, it takes long. We only have about 3 to 4 international agencies that are verifying carbon, meaning that it is not even a local matter. It's not something that communities can actually go to a company and find out, or to an institution and ask what is going on. Most of them are situated in the US, outside this country. And communities tend to feel that so long as the decision is not made within their territories, they feel that they might be taken advantage of. It's a technical and scientific field. You all agree with me. Leo will talk about carbon footprint. You will hear a lot of technical language that leaves you wondering, what is all this? Sustainability. Polluter pay principle is applied here, where it feels like the developing countries continue to emit their emissions, not reducing their emissions at the expense of developing countries that are sequestering the carbon and actually feeling the impact of climate change that my sister was talking about. So we still have a long way to go for communities to feel that the carbon market or the payment of ecosystem services is fair to both the developed countries and the developing countries. Some of the photos that I'm just sharing is us giving money to the community members. Some of the partners are this, which is a clothing line that is in Sri Lanka, doing this as part of their CSR. So by and large, this is what I do. And currently I'm undertaking a carbon project. That's why I came back home, to make sure that there will be signing of MOUs between communities and the company that I'm a founder. And because the communities, most of them don't speak, they only speak my local language, they had to then insist that I am here during the signing of the MOUs. So I'm gonna allow you to, the other subject is quite technical, I'll not talk about it, but just to let you know that I'm part of this particular company. It's called the Earth Acre Company. I'm a co-founder, and those are my credentials. Those are my partners that we are doing this carbon project with. And so far we are signing up about 4 million acres of land to ensure that communities that will sign the MOUs will get what we call the vintage carbon. The vintage carbon is carbon that was sequestered 2018 to 2022. And because of the technology we use, we've been able to analyze the data that they've given us, and we see that they have sufficient evidence to allow them getting paid. So I'm going to allow you some time to ask your questions, interact, and let me not talk about carbon because I know Leo will talk about it, and let me just leave it at the point where this is how we try to localize the international agreements to ensure that communities benefit from the discussions from the multinational environmental agreements that are made outside of our boundaries, and generally share my experiences about how communities are benefiting from the efforts of those of us who are lobbying and advocating for benefit sharing of communities. But I hope I have not taken much more time than I had expected to.
Thank you so much, Patita. And now I'm going to move on to the next speaker. It's Leo. Last but not least, we have a speaker from Burma, Myanmar. Leo, who is also known as Nyezogo, is most widely known in Burma as the activist behind the Save the Irrawaddy Dolphin campaign. But his experience extends beyond Burma. In the past few years, his work covers several citizen science projects in nature conservation, illegal wildlife trade, and education. The most notable among them is a digital escape room game that teaches conservation and sustainability funded by the National Geographic Society. He is featured as a Planet Hero by WWF Myanmar in recognition of his contribution for Irrawaddy dolphin conservation in Burma. He's also a Waisili Grant winner, and his dissertation to human wildlife conflict in Singapore won the best dissertation award from the Shell Company. He has won numerous scholarships to study master in conservation leadership at the University of Cambridge, and most notably from the Silver Strand Capital from Singapore. Today, he's going to talk about how you as an individual can take action to reduce your carbon footprints and emissions. Thank you, Leo, and take it away.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. So today I'm going to talk about the carbon footprint. So what we have right now today is we are practitioners. We are not university lecturers, right? So what we are going to tell are how these principles are being applied in the real life. So that you have an idea of how each of you can contribute towards climate change and make it more fair and equitable for everyone. So the topic I'm going to talk about is the carbon footprint, like how much you are contributing to the carbon emission. Right? Do you guys see the presentation, right? No?
Not yet.
Oh, yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about carbon footprint. So this is going to be the agenda for today, right? So the first I will explain.
Hi, Leo. Sorry,
Yeah.
there are some boxes on your presentation that are covering your slides. Maybe it's because there are some windows or things like that there. Perhaps if you could remove them, that would be great. Thank you.
Is it good now?
There are 3 more.
Oh, good. This one. Can you?
And 2
see?
more.
Let me try again. Is it coming from the Zoom or something else?
And that is Ago, can you just share the PowerPoint screen instead of the whole screen? Just share
Okay.
Your window, like
Yeah. Yeah, go
Okay, is it
down
good
and then
now?
there is
can you
no,
stop?
you can do go down and then there is a screen share at the end. Down there. No. On the window. Yep.
Let me try again. Let me try again.
Okay.
So I have a feeling that I'm opening too many.
So like only share only your PowerPoint, not the whole screen. I think that'll help.
Is it good now?
No, they are still, but okay. Yeah. Why don't you do that? Yep. Yeah, I
Is it
think
good
this
now?
is fine. Let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So first, I'm going to talk about the carbon emission trends, and then after that, we'll discuss about the climate agreements that we have, and then I'll talk about how you can calculate your own carbon footprint, that the amount of carbon you are emitting in your daily lives, and then the last but not least, we will announce our video competition from this teaching event. So.
Okay, yeah,
Can you
there
see
is a big
the
issue. There is an
okay.
issue. It's
I
still
will
covering. So I don't maybe so can you there I
I will change this somewhere else. It's okay. So how about
Okay.
that? Is it better? I think it's coming from the Zoom.
Yeah, I think it's also because when you share screen, are you sharing the entire I don't
Yeah,
know
the
what
presentation.
screen are you okay. But this shouldn't be happening. Can you move it down further?
I
All the way
can't.
down?
Yeah, that's the amount that I can move. Anyway, so
Okay.
I'll move this around a little bit to that, but you can read the slide, right? So the main point of this slide is the carbon emissions are now all-time high. And to get within the 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the magic number that a lot of the climate scientists are claiming that this within this limit, we will be able to preserve the ecosystem functioning and have a stable and prosperous society. Otherwise, above this limit, we are going to have very serious climate impact for all the societies. So to get that, we need to reduce our emissions, and we have to do it very quickly. We have already reached 1.5, 1.1 degree this last year. So we only have a little bit of window to act. And the most recent estimate is we only stand like 50-50 chance of passing 1.5 degree within the 5 years. So the window for opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint is very small now. So I briefly mentioned about the tipping points, right? If the wall goes over 1.5 degree, we are going to see a series of tipping points. So the tipping points are where the biggest when the system change, like tipping point, right? If you have something, and then if you push a little bit and then it tip over, when it tip over, it cannot come back up. So that's the same with natural ecosystems as well. When a natural ecosystem experience a huge stress and it tip over and it goes into a different state, then it cannot come back to the original state. That means we are going to face a bigger storms, flood every year. A lot of these doomsday scenarios are going to happen if we pass the tipping point. So the best way to visualize the tipping point is this something called the donut economy. It's being put forward by this person, Redwood. She's an Oxford economist, and in her book, she proposed this type of economic model. Because in our classical economic models, right, for people who taken Econ 101, the basic level of economic, we know that we have households and we have business and farms, and then it goes in cycles. And one thing that they are missing is natural capital. They think the world is boundless. We can use as much resources as they want without causing any damage to the natural environment. But we have something called externality. Externality is the kind of pollution, is an example that it builds up in the atmosphere. The carbon is in one of the externalities, because these things are not accounted for in the traditional economic models. And it is understandable because these economic models are developed 100 years ago, and then 100 years ago, we don't have this climate crisis. So we now have a different economic model, something called donut economy. And this, what it says is, in the middle of the donut is the social foundations like peace and justice, political voice, social equality, gender equality. These, if you goes within this, these threats are things that we are, the threats that we are facing. And you can see that every sector of the social foundation, we are facing a lot of stress now. We have food shortages, we don't have access to clean water in many countries. And then beyond the ecological scene, which is the outer part of the donut, these are the climate change, also acidification. These are the impacts of the climate change. And the red areas are beyond the boundary, beyond the threshold. So we have already passed, this economists estimate that we have already passed the boundary of the biodiversity lost and nitrogen and phosphate loading, right? So for our economy to thrive and prosper, we have to stay within these two boundaries, ecological ceiling and the social foundation. Within this, only in this boundary, we are going to thrive as a society. So this is an idea that has been put forward, I think 10 years ago. And I have an economic professor when I was studying in NUS, Tam Papali. He is a big advocate of this economic model, and his lifelong work is to incorporate nature capital into traditional economic accounting. So you can have more questions about this later, but the idea behind is the tipping point is we need to, our economy has to operate within a safe ecological limits. And it cannot grow forever. Like a lot of the people are thinking, oh, economic growth, and economy cannot grow forever. Everything has a limit. So this is very recent. I think this came out about 2 weeks ago, the Survival Guide for Humanity. So this is put together by UN climate scientists. And this is because they are seeing that we are going to pass 1.5 degree in another 5 years. So they are putting together a survival guide, which are a series of policy recommendations, not just Burma or Colombia or Kenya. It's for the whole world to tackle the climate crisis quickly and urgently. So we have that. The Paris Agreement is the biggest the transformation that we had in terms of how we are dealing with climate crisis. It is an international treaty on the climate change. It's adopted in 2015, so it's already about 7 years old now. And it talks about climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finances. So the Paris Agreement wants to keep the temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius, and preferably within 1.5 degree. And again, this numbers comes back. 1.5 is the tipping point, right? And it's being rectified by 192 countries out of 196 countries that UN has. So you see the yellow are the countries that does not agree to this, not agree, but they sign, but then they don't create laws to rectify this. Rectify mean you sign this agreement to tackle the climate crisis, and then you also have to put forward a series of reforms and policies to do that in your own local context. And Myanmar, we already have that. And what it requires the countries to do is something called nationally determined contributions. So nationally determined contribution is a non-binding plan. It highlights how you're going to deal with the climate change, how much greenhouse gas emission are you going to reduce, And what policies are you going to implement to tackle the climate change with the framework from the Paris Agreement? Not in the way that you want, but it has to be within the framework of the Paris Agreement. And here the justice, the fairness component comes into debate. Why? Because not every country emit carbon at the same rate. China, for instance, has nearly 30% of all the carbons are emitted by China. And United States contribute about 15%. And the rest of the world is only about 21%. So if you put that number into perspective, right? That's 40 by 5%, nearly half of the carbon emission in the world are emitted by China and US. And how about Burma? How about Burma in our country, or Kenya, or how about Colombia? Yeah, we contribute only a small portion of that. So for that reason, these countries that are emitting a lot of carbons have to do the most to mitigate the climate change. This is where the justice come in, and this is where the nationally determined contributions work. Like they have to reduce the carbon emission drastically, more than any other countries. And when we talk about countries, we have to talk about people, because countries are made up of people. And not everyone on the planet emit carbon at the same rate either, right? In some countries, in some places, in some social demographic classes, they emit more carbon than others. If you look at the thing on the right, you'll see the Middle Eastern country, people living in the Middle Eastern country, like Oman, Qatar, they are emitting 19.5 tons of carbon per year, each person. And in the US, it's about 14.4. And in China, it's about 7.1. So different people in different countries, different lifestyle, they emit different amount of carbon into the atmosphere. And this is where justice come in, right? Who needs to reduce the carbons the most is going to be debated. Again, your lifestyle choices matter too. It's not just the countries and peoples and societies. Yes, you as an individual play as a role too. And if you look at the figure on the right, you will see that the top 10%, the top 10 richest people in the world are emitting nearly half of the carbon in the world. And the bottom 50%, so half of the people, we have 8 billion people, and 4 billion people emit only about 12% of the emissions. How about that? The rich people, the rich 10% is emitting nearly 4 times as much as 50%, half of the people on the planet. So this is, again, where the justice element comes into this debate. Like, who has to reduce the carbon emission the most? So how are we getting so much carbon here, right? Why people are emitting lots of carbon? So this is another graph that is showing how the data on where the carbon emissions are happening. So energy sector, so energy used in industry, transport, in buildings, in food and productions, industries, road transport, aviation. This is the elephant in the room. It emits about 73% of carbon. And then the second one comes from agriculture and forestry and land use and this type of things. So if energy is doing so much, and because of that, we have a lot of spotlight on fossil fuel companies, right? Oh, you guys, these companies are emitting so much carbon into the atmosphere. They have to be held accountable, right? So how do we hold them accountable for the damage that they cause? It's not just countries. We can't. Yes, it's true that US and China emit the most, but it's also we also have to recognize the role of company, business, individuals, and our lifestyle. Each and every one of us has responsibility to tackle this crisis and tackle this crisis. I mean, tackle it fairly and equitably, not just like everybody has to reduce at the same rate. And it is unfeasible because some people are rich, some people are poor, and rich people emit more carbon than poor people. And fossil fuel company emit more carbon than electric car manufacturers, right? So put that into perspective, right? These are the top 20 companies responsible for most of the emission. And if you look at that, you will see these are all fossil fuel companies that sells like oil and natural gas and all these natural resources that are burned into the atmosphere, right? So this is the context in which we are seeing the carbon footprint, right? I would like to summarize at this point that it's different for everyone, and when we have to think about how each individual, how each businesses, how each countries play in this carbon emission to make it fair and equitable for everyone. So, of course, how about yourself, right? You as an individual has to cut your carbon emission too. So I'd like to discuss one thing here, like how does your lifestyle contribute to your carbon footprint? So I want to ask this question to everyone. I want to take like 5 minutes to discuss this. So in the comment box, you can tell me like what do you think is the biggest the daily activities that you do contribute the most to for the carbon emission. You can type into the chat box. Plastic? Yeah. Yeah, plastic is a big issue. Yeah, I will talk about that at the end.
You know, Leo, can I just jump in and, you know, maybe I'll just do public shaming here, you know. So, you know, those who typically boast having so many cars, you know, I think that, you know, when you talk about natural capital, right, in the classical economic model, and how, you know, we need to have macroeconomic principles that really bring natural conservation into the equations. I believe that, you know, having physical assets, personal assets are more than what you need. I'm not gonna go totally into, you know, communism and all that, but then you know, some people having like 6 or 7 cars, absolutely wasteful. And I believe that you know, governments need to tax, right? Let's say 10 times if you buy a second car unnecessarily, right? 10 times more, and then take that money and give it back to poor countries, you know. And it's ridiculous that rich people boast having so many cars, and they only have to pay the same amount of money as, you know, buying you know, your first car, right? And so these are the same things, and the same thing is true of like having multiple houses, homes unnecessarily that you're not even living in, right? And you talk about rich people, 10% of the population emitting 48% of carbon in your graph. And that's exactly what they're doing. Unnecessarily owning multiple homes for no reason, no survival reason at all whatsoever. And governments must tax them 100 times more, 1,000 times more, so that they don't buy them.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be my.
Yeah, your remark is absolutely spot on this climate crisis, right? We have this problem of excess. Yeah, some people are so ridiculously rich that they can buy whatever, and they can emit so much carbon. And because there's some of the people I know come to Cambridge to study, they use personal helicopter to study here. Can you imagine that? People commute by using helicopter every day, came to Cambridge and attend class, and they go back by using the helicopter to London. Yeah, there are people like that, and these are the kind of people that are contributing the most to the emission, and then for that reason, yeah, they have to pay higher taxes or some sort of reparation for the damage that they have caused. And many of the people who are commenting many of the people who are commenting are putting like transportation and daily commute as the biggest carbon emission. Well, we'll see. Because I'm going to show you guys the carbon calculators, your carbon footprint calculators, like how much carbon you are emitting in very soon. And also to add to the Gochomoton's comment, right? There are these days some ideas, something called minimalism, something called sharing cultures. These are the people who are coming together to have a simpler lifestyle and to tackle the overconsumption, right? This is the paradigm shift in a way that that is also inspired by Zen Buddhism. So we'll talk about that later. So I'll move on. So yeah, thanks a lot for the comments. I will show again. So yeah, these are the carbon calculators. So there are several popular carbon calculators. If you look at this and then type into your phone screens or tablet computers or things like that, you will find there are ways to calculate your carbon footprint. Right? I will not go too much into the detail, but when you have, after this class, when you have time, you can go back to these links. I will share this presentation. In fact, we will share this video record with you guys later, so you can go back and then check these carbon calculators. I highly recommend that. And for the reference, like average household in the developing countries use about 500 kilowatt hour of electricity each month. So these are the wealthy nations per capita carbon emission, right? You will see like Saudi Arabia and US are always at the highest. Their people usually emit about 17 tons of carbon per people. And you multiply it with what, 300 million people in the US, that's a lot of carbon per year, right? So this is trying to put into context of how much carbon each person is emitting in different countries in the world. So after you do your own carbon emission, you can try to benchmark yourself with what you have in this graph, like see where you lies, right? So that way you will have an idea of how much carbon you are emitting and how compared to different people in different countries. And these carbon emitters also include not just transportation, lifestyle, electricity consumption. They also take into account of the food that you eat, how many vacations that you take, things like that. So it's very comprehensive, and it always take about 15-20 minutes to do that. So of course, the first thing that I have to talk about is food, right? Because food is a big thing. Agriculture, it contributes about 17% of carbon emission, right? What you eat really contribute a lot to carbon footprint. And what I mean by that is among all the food, meat and dairies are highly emission intensive. So if you look at the graph on the right, meat contributes, like in our daily meat, right? Meat contributes to about 56% of the carbon emission. And among the meat, beef is the most polluting. This is why we have a lot of debate in Amazon. The Amazon forest, the rainforest, is being cut down to grow soy, and soy is used for beef cultivation. So when they want to breed cows and have milk and have beef, then they feed cows the grass and soy, so the cow can grow. And this is highly polluting because it takes a lot of land and it destroys a lot of forest. And when you destroy the forest, not only you release the carbon stored in this forest, you also create another problem with beef, because with cows, because when they poop, they emit methane. Methane is even more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And another thing that we have found in recent years is the shrimp. And the problem with the shrimp is the shrimp only survive in the coastal type of habitat. So the mangrove, which are considered the blue carbon, because it store higher amount of carbon than even the rainforest. And the mangrove in Burmese is called deodar, right? Deodar is mangrove, and mangrove are being cut down to make way for shrimp farms. So if you want to change your diet, then stop eating beef and stop eating shrimp, and that your carbon footprint from food will go down significantly. You can see that, right? So cheese is the second, and then pork is only like 1.72. So beef is about like 4 times as polluting as pork. And for that reason, in recent years we have this trend of people switching to vegan. Yeah, we have plant-based meat, right? We have Beyond Burger, we have Impossible Burger. These are all plant-based meat. Plant-based meat is not the real meat, but you have this protein ingredients and then you squash them into a hamburger patty or make it look like meat and taste like meat, but it's not the real meat. The idea behind this is if you feed soy or these ingredients into a cow or a pig or a chicken and make them grow, you need a lot of these ingredients to get 1 pound of beef. But if you can grind them into a hamburger, for instance, then it saves a lot of energy, it saves a lot of ingredients. And a lot of people subscribe to this type of vegan diet. So I'll move this a little bit. So this become very popular in recent years. A lot of people are signing up to become vegetarians. And the trend is on the rise, and so does the Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers. So their stock prices are going up and up in recent years. So in terms of the statistics, right? And from Statista, so they said like 14% of the world population is turning into vegetarian these days. So that's not a lot, but that's encouraging. And in Cambridge, in ourselves, we have this something called plant-based universities. So we are advocating the university catering service to go plant-based meat and stop serving meat altogether. They have already stopped serving beef in our cafeteria, and that create a lot of controversies as well. We have votings and we have referendums, and then we have a lot of debates in the student union because some of the people think this is not inclusive. And they think that it is it has to be a systemic change. We're talking about systemic change here, like the university. But a lot of people, they think like it's not inclusive and it's not fair because the university is imposing this type of lifestyle on people. Whereas we as the sustainability advocates, we are also saying that, hey, it's okay, because if you want to eat meat, you can eat meat in the city. You don't have to eat in the university. There are so many other different restaurants that you can have meat from, but this is a symbolic move and we are going to move in the right direction. You make your individual choice. Right, so should the university canteens only serve plant-based meat? It is a highly controversial one, but we want that. So how about good, John Morton, you are running a university, Parami University. So if I advocate for this campaign in your university, what would you think? I think
I will now take it back to rich countries' universities versus a poor countries' universities, okay? And we'll go back to Cambridge University and Oxford University to make sure that they cut down the carbon footprints. We don't even have a campus, for God's sake, and our students are learning in the most difficult situations, for God's sake. Okay, so cut down your costs.
Yeah. No. I mean, in the intellectual, purely, in a purely intellectual debate, right? Well, as an educator, what do you think about this kind of campaign? Like where do you lie? Like individual choices?
That was a joke. That was a joke. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so of course, a systemic change needs to happen. Many people, I mean, like given the fact that we're even talking here, right? Thinking about, classical, like economic models, and then, like we have these concepts, okay? And the majority of the people, if you talk to people on the street, they would not understand it, right? So it takes a different level to understand and grapple with the concepts of natural capital, thinking about a conservation into your economic equations, right? These things, it takes time. And then so systemic change, people will resist, because if you think about just, systemically from the government side, from the, UN side or whatever, to put, let's say, more tax on it, You know, I mean, rich people will understand it. They know, they just want to be ignorant, and they just don't want to listen to it because it doesn't benefit them. But it is what governments must do. And then there is so much corruption, of course, that sometimes it's so depressing that these rich people have much influential power on legislation, which really makes systemic change hard as well, right? And
Yeah,
so
I totally agree with
to
that.
affect, and that's why we need to have more grassroots organizations to speak out for the most impoverished, the most vulnerable people, and take it to higher order systemic change and put, you know, responsible government officials to shame, as well as, I would say here, wealthy individuals as well, right? Because they are the ones who are
Exactly.
causing the greatest damage. And then so
Exactly.
without accountability on them, things will not change. So make it a shameful behavior to own 10 cars, to own 10 homes in this modern world. Make it
Yeah.
a public campaign, publicly shame them. That's how I would
But
say.
there is no public shaming as of now. But what we
As of
have
now,
right
no.
the rise of
Right.
the EVs, right? The EVs, people are taking in the people are because the people who are driving the electric vehicles like Tesla, right? They're not buying the car, right? They are buying the hey, I am a sustainability advocate, so I
Not
drive
sure about that, but
Not
what
that,
they want to do is
yeah,
I guess,
that's
like,
the
you know,
debate.
status demonstration.
Some
Do
of
they
them, yeah,
actually
some of
care?
them do as well. But the
I have
idea
some
is,
doubts about it.
yeah, but the premise, the things that these companies, these car companies, especially Tesla, is selling that, hey, we are environmentally friendly. Yeah, of course, there are debates about mining lithium and producing batteries, but the marketing campaign is like, hey, you're an environmental friendly person, right? So anyway, we have to move on. But before we move on, can I do some sort of opinion poll? But raise your hand, because guys, you are students and you have been to university, even though Parami doesn't even have a campus and you don't come to the campus, but you have been to universities, you have been to high schools, and that has buildings and campus and physical infrastructure, right? So in case if you cannot buy any meat from where you study, like, is that acceptable for you? Like, raise your hand, like, if you want to, if you agree with that. Yeah, it's not for everyone, right? These things are these ideas are slowly coming into the societies that they are staying new. It will take some time for them to crystallize and for people to gain acceptance, but that's okay. All these social movement are all like that. Like we have we wanted to end slavery, and it takes like decades to end slavery. We want like civil rights, black people and white people get the same vote, and it takes time. It takes decades, but this is happening. Yeah. So yeah, anyway, I will move on to another topic. So another one we have is about traveling. So how you travel also matters. And this is not a secret, right? This is the elephant in the room. And everybody has already said that.
Okay. Yeah, you have moved the box. You know, I was just trying to tell you to move the box.
Yeah. Yeah, so many people have already identified it in the comment box, right? So commute, it creates it emits a lot of carbon. And on the right, you will see the domestic flight. That is the short journey flight, like from Yangon to Mandalay or from Yangon to Bangkok. And these are the type of flights that emit the highest amount of carbon. And then when you go down, like the medium-sized car, if you use petrol, if you use diesel, these are highly polluting. And then if you go down and down and down, right, you will get like national rail, like the train is usually the least carbon emission intensive. But in our country, in Burma, the rail system is not good, so we are relying so heavily on cars which are highly polluting, which is a shame. And for that reason, in European countries and in the richer countries, we have the rise in cycling, carpooling, and EV revolutions in the recent years. So this is an estimate This is an estimate that by 2030, more than half of the US car sales will become electric. And in the US, we have carpool lanes. If you have more than 2 people in the car, you can drive in this lane and then you don't have to, you will not be stuck in the traffic. And there are bike cycling campaigns, and there is one in Cambridge. Cambridge has become a cycling town. And we don't use cars because the roads are very small, and car parking charges are also very expensive. So there is a big biking community in Cambridge. So something like that we have in Netherlands, in France, a lot of people are turning into ride bicycles. I have a friend when I was working for in MI City Park in Yangon, and you guys know where MI City Park is, right? It's a little bit far from the city, and usually I go from after work. I usually go out and then play tennis in Thametview Tennis Court, which is about if you go by car, right? If the traffic is clear, it will take about 30 minutes, and if the traffic there is a heavy traffic, it will take about over an hour. I usually use taxi, and I have a friend who bikes all the way from MI City Park to all the way to Thametview Tennis Court to play tennis, and we usually arrive at the same time. And then there is one conversation with him one day. I talk about carbon footprint, and then one thing he said stuck with me until today. He said, "You have much bigger carbon footprint than me because you drive a car." I was saying that, hey, you're Westerners, you're emitting a lot, but he said, no, you have bigger carbon footprint because you drive a car. So yeah, that has stuck with me ever since. So, okay, so I would like to create another opinion poll, right? What are the most practical ways to reduce your carbon footprint from traveling? So many of you has identified like commuting is the problem. So what are the alternatives? What do you guys would do about that? I would like to hear some opinion. So type it in the comment, type your comment in the chat box. Public transportation. Yeah, it's a systemic change. It's a systemic change. Work from home. Yeah, it's a very, very good comment. Yeah, you can work from home. You don't have to travel these days. If you don't have to travel, you don't need to, right? Yeah, stay at home. It's a good alternative. How about ride sharing? Ride sharing has become popular, right? We have Grab and Uber, and we can share rides. You don't have to take individual trip. You can share, and it's cheaper too, right? It's cheaper if you share your trip with someone else. But for the interest of time, we have to move on. So I will share again. So there is something called minimalism that's going on. So is precisely to tackle the execs, right? The rich people, right? What is happening today is we have this something called capitalist consumption culture. We tend to consume and overconsume, right? On the right, if you look at the lifestyle of a US person, a person who is living in the US, if it requires 5 arts to support the lifestyle of a US citizen, or not a US citizen, but someone who has an average lifestyle in the US, right? If you're from Denmark, it requires 4.2 art. And if you're from Indonesia, you need 1 art. So all these countries in the UK, US, all these countries, the way that they are consuming, they have 10 cars and they have 3 houses, and they are doing taking 5 vacations a year, using the commercial flights. So these are the highly pollutive behavior, and they eat a lot of beef, right? So this is called the overconsumption culture. And what is driving this is this money-centered lifestyle drive people to work harder and do things that they don't want to do, leading to mental burnout and overall unhappiness. But the problem is they have this mindset that you have to consume to make yourself happy, which is not true at all. And the problem is our population is rising. It's already 8 billion, and it's rising and rising and rising. And if you compare yourself with other people on the social media, And if you go over consume, then you're going, our planet is going to be in trouble really soon. And if you look at the iPhone ad like this, right? Advertisement, right? They're saying like, oh, the new era iPhone. They're saying like, your iPhone, you suck because your phone is out of date. And they want you to buy, they want you to consume. And that's the problem. So minimalism is the idea that is inspired by Zen Buddhism. In Buddhism, right? We have this something called complacency, right? We don't tend to the Buddha doesn't ask people to consume, right? They have to consume as small as the least amount of product as possible, right? So buying higher quality stuff is better for utility. If you buy like the lower quality stuff that goes out of date, or that become ruined, or that become like Chinese like one-time use products, right? You're going to it will cost you much more. I can guarantee you that. So buying higher quality stuff is better, and buying less instead of more, right? Is less stress on ecosystems. And they have something called the sharing culture. If you don't use one thing, if something if you have no longer using something, then share it with someone else. It's a post-circular economy model. There are a lot of things that you can share, right? And you need to be more conscious of what you consume. For instance, bottled water, for instance, water doesn't work a lot. You're buying plastic bottle, right? Yeah, these kind of things you have to be more conscious about. And if you have less trash, if you have less stuff, then less clutter free up more time for you to learn and for you to give. It's a lifestyle. Minimalism is a lifestyle with the goal of finding the meaning in life. And that meaning in life is material consumption does not correlate well with happiness at the highest level. So there is a link there, IMDb, that's the movie, that's the trailer of a movie called Minimalism. And if you look at, there is actually the scientific proof of that. So if you look at this graph, right? So what it tells is the income is on the x-axis, on the y-axis is how much negative emotion that you can that means that the smaller the reduction in negative emotions mean less negative emotion, right? So what it is saying is if you're poor, right? If you only make like $10,000 a year, of course, if your income is higher, you are happier. So rising means you are happier, right? And then after some time, it doesn't rise as much anymore because if you are making like 40,000 USD per year, and if you move to 80,000 USD, it doesn't really make much of a difference in the lifestyle. It doesn't lead you much happiness. And then after 80,000, it drops. Right? The more money you have, the more time you have to worry about how to maintain your lifestyle, how to invest your money, and you have a lot of work, right? So the more money you have, the more unhappy you become, right? So that's minimalism is the way, it's the philosophical thinking to tackle this type of excessive lifestyle that Coach Omoto has been want to tackle. So sharing cultures, right? So I talked briefly about sharing culture. So what are the things that you can possibly share with your friends, relatives, neighbors, colleagues, or even strangers? There are a lot of things that you can share. For instance, clothes. So on the right, you will see this is what is happening downstairs where I am talking right now. So they have anti-Black Friday. Black Friday is a shopping event, right? So during the Black Friday, they have this initiative. Don't buy stuff, share with each other. If you feel like one of the clothes that you're wearing is out of date, then you share with someone else. Somebody might need it. You do go swap, right? And you can share taxi, the car sharing, the ride sharing, and you can share books, you can share food, you can share cooking utensils, you can share tools like hardwares. And these are all shares. How many times do you use like hammers and screwdrivers in a month, right? You only use like 3 or 4 times. You don't need to have it with you all the time. You can share it with among neighbors, seriously, but nobody do that. And last but not least, if we talk about like the consumption, right? The plastic waste is the elephant in the room. And it is an elephant in the room, because if you look on the right, right, this is the most recent one coming out of what is it? About I think it's coming from this this study. I think it's shared by the UN. What happened is Myanmar is among the top 10 countries, the plastic polluters in the world. Yes, seriously, Myanmar is only has 60 million, but compared to India and China, look at that. Compared to India and China, we are not much behind. They have 1 billion, over 1 billion people. Why? Because we throw away the trash. This doesn't even need any any support by the data connection. You can just go out on any drain, and then you will see it's clogged with plastic. Everybody can see that, right? And WWF is estimating that all of us on the planet, all the people on the planet, we are eating like 1 credit card equivalent of plastic a week. Think about that. Yeah, you throw away the trash, you eat it. And the biggest contributor is this, of course, right? What exactly are you buying, right? If you look at the plastic bottle water, right? It's only what about one. So it's still like 1.5 USD. That's the average price. In Burma, I think it's about 500 chats. Whatever it is, the thing is the water inside is only what's like 3 cents or 25 chats or something like that. And so what you are buying? What are you buying? Are you buying plastic bottle or are you buying water? Think about this. And you throw away the plastic bottle and then you eat it. What's it's a very bad idea, right? So what are the alternatives? Yeah, you can buy in big containers, and then this container you don't throw away, you refill it, right? We have this type of water purification machines. I've been using this in my home, in my Yangon home for more than 20 years, and of course it's a huge initial investment, but after using like 3 or 4 years, it's more than break even. And then we are selling as part of our AR Dolphin initiative, we are selling like refill bottles. Yeah, you don't have to throw away. You can refill your water. You can buy this type of bulk big water jugs, and then you can refill your refill bottles. You don't have to buy bottled water, right? In Cambridge, we have this. This is sitting next to me. Actually, I just took the photo. So, what is your preferred solution, right? Type it in the chat box. Like if you don't have to buy water, then what do you buy? So when I was young, when I was 10 years old, when I was 8 years old, when I go to my primary school, right, I have to bring my own water. The school doesn't provide water. We cannot go out and buy the plastic water bottle. We have to bring our own refillable water. The same thing is true for lunch. We have to bring our own lunch box, steel lunch box, not the styrofoam lunch that you can easily buy. So type it in the chat box. What do you think is the best option? You can buy water too. It stay viable, but there are debates as in some places the water is not clean, so it's not safe for consumption. But these are few and far between. And in fact, throughout the history of Burmese people, in fact, even your parents, right? When they were young, they are boiling water and they are drinking this boiled water. They are not drinking purified bottled water. Purification device, yeah. Yeah. So I'll move on. So this summarizes everything that I'm talking today, right? There are personal choices that you can make to reduce your contribution to climate change. If you can upgrade your light bulbs to become energy efficient, and I mind you, there are households that are still using these yellow light bulbs that are highly energy intensive. If you change that, it's a low impact, but your electricity is the biggest contributor, because remember, energy is 73%. Energy to light up your home, even though some some homes these days don't have electricity anymore, but if you have electricity, this can be the way to go. And then there are other things like hand dry the clothes, recycle the stuff, and replace your change to the hybrid car, things like that. It can have moderate impact to reduce your carbon footprint. And then the higher impact one, right? If you eat a plant-based diet, or at least like avoid eating beef and shrimp, then it can make a difference, right? And if you do the cycling, yeah, it can contribute a lot. And the last but not least, our population is rising, and having one fewer child is the biggest. Having a lot of child is the biggest contribution to climate change, because more people consume more. And we have the problem with the population boom. We have 8 billion people. We have too many people now. So with that, I will end the presentation, and I will listen to the questions before I will announce the video competition.